can small companies benefit from network automation, or is network automation really only for large networks? How do you define the line between automating or not? You know, so I'll take a crack at this to kick it off. If it's a repeatable task that you do over and over again, you've got a use case for automation, and that doesn't matter how big you are. You don't need to be very large to make that happen. It's not that you're doing one task to 500 devices. It's that you might be doing one task 500 times over the course of time. So a case in point, back before F5 had a lot of APIs and there were a lot of tooling that was around that I could have automated in a fancy way, F5 virtual IPs, I was in a situation of having to manually create virtual IPs on that F5 load balancer for a particular shop I worked for that had a lot of QA applications coming in and out of the QA, sitting behind that QA load balancer. You don't have to sit and click in that stupid F5 GUI that many times before you're like, okay, I'm gonna figure out some other way to do this because it takes forever and it's very error prone, and began working at the TMOS shell to speed that process up. It wasn't automation, but it moved things along much more quickly and made it much easier for me to push changes into that F5 environment, because I had to do it all the time. It wasn't that we were, you know, it was a huge environment. It was just I did the same thing over and over and over and over again as trouble tickets came across. So anybody else want to add to that?
I think you called out my usual comment to people is it's not the size of the network, it's the frequency of changes, like how dynamic your environment is. I mean, I've certainly worked with some customers that had 4 switches, but it was hundreds of changes a day, right? Or, you know, a pair of firewalls with thousands of firewall rules that are constantly changing, right? And I think it's easy to focus on configuration management because those are fairly straightforward, low-hanging fruit. But I look at it as well as like all of my operations troubleshooting tasks. I'd much rather write a consistent, repeatable process when I'm awake. So when the pager goes off at 2 a.m. and I'm troubleshooting something, I just click go and magic happens. Especially if I have to click go 200 times. There is always value in making repeatable processes. So,
I'll throw in a comment there that this might come from a vector you're not expecting. So even if you're only maintaining an environment with a handful of top or rack switches and you've collapsed a lot of things, like everyone's been saying about the repeatable tasks, a lot of times your processes inbound go to your email inbox and then you take care of things from there. If you as a network team have never talked to your business level orchestrator, say your ServiceNow admin, it is extremely easy for that person to create a form for you and gather data and attach that back to a change ticket. And if you were kind of ripple this through into your devices, right? This is how you stop making a mess of your firewall, or you add tags to rules that you put in your firewall, or change why was this put in, what was the purpose of this, and it all goes back into our records and documentation. That platform, as an example, has a ton of flexibility, and even just to gather data for you is widely valuable, right? And I spend a lot of time in the past cleaning up firewalls, and I know everyone here has, and it always makes me cry when I see a Palo Alto firewall implemented and it's got the same 1,000 rules cut over from an ASA, and I look at it and go, well, I could do this with 40, and I'd rather just document 40 rules than replicate 1,000 statements. And the way you keep from creating a mess is getting that process done. And those automations of people process don't always belong all the way in the mechanisms, all the way deep into your actual systems. Like you wouldn't want an end user to be able to run a workflow unless it's your core function, right? You wouldn't want a business user to be able to submit a ServiceNow ticket that makes a change in your core firewall, but maybe you want them to do it in some other place. But still, there's a lot of people process that needs to be automated, and some of that doesn't belong in your Puppet systems or your other systems. It belongs elsewhere. Get the rationale done, get the approvals done, get the emails done. Those, especially if your company is invested in those solutions, bonkers expensive. By all means, use them.
I would probably agree on the comment about integrating with those other systems. I mean, there are plenty of best practices steps that are really easy to forget when you're just jumping on the console and running. But even just basic wins, doing things like, hey, sending a message into the Slack channel to say I've just executed this change. So when the world explodes in 5 minutes, you can see that, or take the output of the commands I've run and put them in a comment in Jira so that 3 days from now you can see the history. These are steps that often get missed or in a rush, especially in an emergency situation. Recording what you did is less important than getting the site back up.